Now, okay, so this is a members Q&A. So if you're rewatching this and you're not a member, you're rewatching it, so don't freak out. But also, you can become a member to get access to these members only Q&As. You don't have to if you don't want to. I have my Friday Q&A that's open to everybody. I always just feel kind of bad because my public Q&As, there's hundreds of comments going by and lots of members comments that I miss. And so I decided to start doing two Q&As a week. One for everybody and one for members. Just, I mean, they support me and I want to make sure that it's reciprocal, so I'm giving back a little bit. And um, eventually I will start doing like a monthly drawing for like a free like one-on-one consultation for my members too. I want to get settled into this first, into the rhythm, before I start doing that, just to give myself, one little thing of comfort, like used to at a time before I step into that. So we're gonna wait for some people to roll in, and if let's go to all messages, there we go, and if it's just me and Kimberly hanging out, that's fine too. Looks like we've got at least 3 members here, and then my daughter will join the admin, although I don't suspect we'll need a whole lot of adminning today, but we'll find out, and she'll be able to share some stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and make some tea while we wait for people to show up. And it's not going to be like a normal Q&A where there's like hundreds of people, and that's the point. It's a little calmer, right? So hello to everybody who's rolling in. So I'm going to have the typing tea, I'm probably saying it wrong, from Anu Hai. I really like this one. I'm supposed to have a special brewing cup for it just so you can watch it dance like seaweed, but I have not noticed that it changes the flavor much when I brew it in my little pot here, and it's the one that's all flat and looks like seaweed, and so when you have it in a big cup, you get to watch it like dance as it loosens up, but yeah, I think more like of already existing members will join in on these as we get to know that they're happening, right? And so it's all right. My nervous system could probably use a relatively calm Q&A, right? I'm just kind of existing today and gonna putter around the house a little bit, get it picked up, and then that's it. The next 2 days, I'm probably not going to do much, a whole lot. That's the goal anyway. Hey, everybody's showing up. But first, tea. Okay, so we're going to go, right where, well, actually, I'm going to go to 1. I'm arguing with myself in my brain what I want to do. We're going to do 175. We're going to call it a good middle ground, because I was like, I don't know if I want to do 170 or 180. Hey, everybody rolling in. I think that these will be, at first at least, much calmer Q&As. I really do. I'm so happy that you're here too, Maria. I know that I feel like, I don't know, I know that there might get to a point where there might be so many members in here that I might still miss questions, but it's far less odds than on the Chaos Live Q&As. Last Friday was bad with trolls. There was a point in time where I couldn't see anybody's questions because all I saw was like a stack of people being blocked. And I was like, okay, I gotta wait for that to roll by, and just kind of let that happen. And then, I don't know. So I just kind of almost I'm going to have to adapt to the slower pace probably of the members Q&A, but I think it's a good thing. And then today I need to go, after this, I need to go feed baby Delilah. And she's such a big girl now, the baby goat. She is so big now. She's like not having to sleep in her cage at night. She runs around with all the other goats. She still freaks out whenever she sees me because she wants a bottle, but and you have to introduce a bottle-fed baby into the herd really carefully because, like, adult goats will harm and kill young babies that aren't theirs, especially if they don't have like a mom protecting them. So for like the past couple weeks, she's been in like at night and throughout the day in like a big dog kennel right next to them all. And then we'd feed her and then we'd let her out and she would like, we'd sit down in the barn with her for like half an hour. She like ran around and played with the other baby goats. And then it kind of just slowly introduced her into the herd and now she's just hanging tough. And funny enough, she hangs out with her sister a lot, which didn't get rejected by the mom. And so I don't know if they know that they're sisters. I don't know, but they still hang out tough like that, you know. Hey everybody, you're rolling in, saying hello. You know, I guess usually I wait for my tea to be ready, but that usually gives everybody a chance to roll in. And I guess I should still do that because there could still be people coming. Right now we're like 11 strong. Oh, I got a super. Thank you, Ellie. She said, thank you for answering my GABA comments. Read the ADHD, ADD. Maybe expand more on it. Yeah. So she had said earlier on one of my videos that the way she helps with her ADD, ADHD is she takes a GABA supplement. And my main thing about that is that maybe it's not as potent, but it's very similar to taking a benzodiazepine. And when you start taking a direct, like, there's a difference between taking something that, let's say, naturally increases your GABA levels, like, let's say, California poppy, and something that forces stimulation, like GABA or a benzodiazepine. And so what happens is when you force that stimulation, when you force that amino acid to always be raised in your brain, if you decide to stop, you're going to have a rough fucking go of it, because what happens is your GABA acid levels have been so high that, like, basically, like, the neural pathways and like the receptors for GABA have been in overdrive, and so they're expecting a lot, and then when you go back to normal levels and they don't get what they want, they freak out. And I say that as a person who went through serious benzo withdrawal, and it took me about 2.5 years to slowly taper off. Now, I don't think the GABA supplement you're on will be as strong as benzos. I just want you to make sure that you just have quite a bit extra on hand in case you decide to start slowly coming off of it. And I mean, like, really, really, really go slow. And if you start having bad symptoms, go slower. Right. Again, it won't be as bad as like benzos would be, but you know, and also when we super stimulate our GABA, it's not necessarily, and you're using it for like attention, and that's valid, but you're probably like pushing your dopamine levels down pretty significantly, because these things don't like live independently in our body. Like, if your dopamine's like way too high, you can push your GABA down. If your GABA's way too high, it can push your dopamine down. If your cortisol, your stress hormone, is super high, all of those hormones go down. And so it's not just like something that isn't impacting everything else, right? And so you just have to be kind of careful with it. And also, usually with attention stuff, I would look into like supporting your dopamine receptors as well. Because when we can't pay attention and we bounce all over things, a lot of it can be due to like looking for like dopamine hits, right? But also like glutamate is typically involved in things like that. And GABA directly represses glutamate activity, so that's probably why you get a good amount of relief working with GABA, because it's repressing that overexcitability that the glutamate is causing. But you might find just as good results working with like a low glutamate diet or herbs that lower glutamate, anything like that, you know. Oh, I missed a bunch. Thank you so much for the super, Brandy Bishop. And then I might have missed a question. I did not. So yeah, and what was really hard for me when I was coming off of benzos is like I couldn't use anything that stimulated GABA, because it was like picking a wound, you know. It made a lot of symptoms and stuff come back, but I'm years out from stepping down. That's crazy to think it's been like 5 or 6 years since I've come off of benzos, and it took me a long time, but yeah. Okay, looks like my tea is ready. I just brew everything for 3 minutes. There there's definitely some stuff that could go longer than 3 minutes for sure. I'm just like, 3 minutes will do you. Some could go shorter, probably. I really tried like other brewing methods and stuff, but like I don't like the 10-second increments, and like I don't want to do math with my tea, so I just do Western style a lot. Okay. Melody's Garden says, my daughter will be working in Washington this summer. Will you be possibly doing a meetup this summer? I know you've announced them in the past. I'd like to coordinate my visit with her and attend one. I might do one. I just need to see how I'm feeling this summer. The problem that I have with meetups is that my brain does not care that my body is a living human being. And so, like, the other ones, I'd be like, oh, yeah, we'll talk for an hour in the park. And then, like, 4 hours goes by, and, like, I'm losing my voice and I'm still talking. Like, I need a handler. Right? Like, I need my husband to be like, hey, this isn't abusive. I just have to stop her because her brain doesn't know how, right? Like, it's hard in that regard. But, I'm, like, this close to, I think, helping myself tremendously with my health. Like, I've just been like deep into genetics and understanding things, and I think once I get a fair amount of that resolved, I'll definitely talk about it, obviously, but I might be able to control my OEs better, which stands for overexcitability. It's part of my neurodiversity, right? It's how I'm able to dump my brain out, right? Hey, Tisha, thank you for joining us. My doctor had me on Augmentin, and it messed my liver up. What can I do? Depends on like how it messed your liver up, right? But like you can always start working with like really gentle stuff like dandelion root tea, getting all rancid seed oils out of your diet, just because those are really hard on your liver. Like the polyunsaturated fatty acids that aren't naturally occurring. Like you can eat walnuts, but don't fuck with like vegetable oil or like grapeseed oil or any of that thing that you wouldn't naturally be able to encounter. Can be really hard on the liver. NAC has been shown to be pretty great for the liver. And that's a pretty easily accessible nutrient that you can get. Once you find you like respond to dandelion root okay, you could very slowly start working with milk thistle, right? But I would look into the type of damage that you're experiencing, correlation to what herbs people are talking about using with it, right? Somebody said, you are probably the most generous person with your knowledge. Thank you for all you do. I try. I do, and I try. I mean, it's in there. I gotta get it out. And I don't know. I feel like it's important. I'm only going to exist for so long, and I like to share what I know while I know it. And sometimes I feel, and this might make my daughter feel some sort of emotional because she's modding right now, assuming she's in here. And, sometimes I feel like, I don't know. It's weird feeling unless like something happens where the internet doesn't exist anymore, that like when I'm gone my daughter could watch these videos, or my grandchildren or my great grandchildren could watch this type of stuff for information. And I just think that's interesting to me. I think about that, but I think about it beyond like my own family too, And plus, my brain wants this. Sometimes my body doesn't have the energy for it, but my brain wants it. Okay, so Tammy asks a question. Can you recommend where to buy Tiger's Milk Mushroom? I'm having a hard time finding it. Honestly, there have been some capsules online on Amazon that I've been able to find. They've been pretty decent. I don't remember the name of them. There's only a handful of them there, and that's what I ended up using. If not, you're going to have to find like a source through like a TCM provider, like traditional Chinese medicine. If you look around on those shops, you could probably find them, but I don't have like an exact, like off the top of my head place that you could get them. But I know people are getting into growing them more. Just because there's more of a demand entering the Western market outside of like China type area. Somebody says, so glad to see you. Thank you, Pondering Amanda. Question. Hello from the UK, April. Hope you and your family are well. Right straight in there. Anything you can recommend for low libido and dryness? Killing me. Yeah, so you probably have low testosterone. it's such a travesty that, like, at least in the US, whenever they test us, like females for hormones, at best they look at estrogen and DHEA. They're like, we don't care about your testosterone and progesterone. Estrogen's all that matters. But it's such bullshit, because while testosterone is definitely like more prevalent in males, in females we still need it, and it directly drives our libido pretty aggressively. Although some people say that DHEA is more of a factor, but it's more of a precursor. And so if you don't have enough DHEA, you won't have enough testosterone, period. But dryness and low libido is usually like testosterone. And because we have so little of it, it's very easy for it to be low, right? And high estrogen, even too high of progesterone, can lower your testosterone levels. So you could get that tested. You could also just try, consider working with pine pollen. Pine pollen supplement would be fantastic for that. It's basically tree semen. There's no other way to say it, but it has like androgens in it. It has like all the male hormone precursors, but your body will use that. Female or male, it's a fantastic option for that. Let me roll back up here. Okay, so question: what do you use for replacing electrolytes? I love a good high quality salt, you know, like a sea salt. I also really like orange juice, right? Right, you're looking at potassium, magnesium, and salt. Right? So you have to find things that are high in that. Naturally, if you get a good quality sea salt, it has a lot of magnesium and sodium in it, right? And so if you get yourself some high quality, like real orange juice or bananas, it's going to have potassium in it. And, you know, you can even get magnesium from like cherry juice. I have quite a few videos on it where you can like make your own electrolytes at home, right? But really, it's just salt and fruit is an electrolyte, right? If you add a little bit of salt to your orange juice, just made a full spectrum electrolyte, right? Especially if that's sea salt, so it does have magnesium in it. The wetter the salt is, like it seems like a wet texture, the more electrolytes that it will have in it in regards of like magnesium, right? But also, I mean, if you're pretty serious about wanting to get like your potassium levels back up, you could make some potato water. Or you could just make like potato soup and you're using that broth, right? It all enters, the potassium enters it, right? Potassium is probably the harder one that people need more of, but also I don't really like supplementing potassium unless you actually know that you have a low level potassium, because isolated potassium in supplement form can really fuck your heart up pretty quickly. Okay, so I have scarring on my brain from migraines. I get the brain thing. There are some days I just can't do anything because I can't find the words. Yeah, that's hard. That's hard, and I mean, I don't even know if that was like a question for resolving. Right? I will say, one thing that you might consider that just popped into my mind is when I had a really bad concussion that the doctors were like, "You're hysterical. Are you on your period?" Right? Like, I had a really bad concussion, and I came across a lot of information about red light therapy for like healing TBIs, and I want to say in all that research, and it's been quite a few years, but I want to say I came across where they saw that it was like dealing with like scar issues in the brain. They were even using it for Alzheimer's patients. So you might do some research into that. I mean, it would maybe help. It would maybe help at least like get like your mitochondria up and functioning again. That might heal a little bit of it. But I was really interested when I came across that, and then I looked like a crazy person when I was like laying there with my red light just on my head. But I mean, you know, fuck, what are we gonna do? No one else is gonna fix it for us. Somebody said I use wild yam cream. Cram. That was an awesome. I don't remember the name for it, but my brain was like, let's swap out those dyslexic letters, April. I use a wild yam cream to try to help, but it's still struggle. If you're using that for like dryness and libido, wild yam has disogen in it, and disogen is a precursor that your body can turn into DHEA, and then your body takes DHEA and it says, oh, I need to be estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. But here's the catch. If you are already estrogen dominant and you're using wild yam cream or even just DHEA supplements, your body is likely to just shunt it into estrogen. it kind of gets stuck in that pathway. You might find more support if you're going to go that way. If you use vitamin E supplements or really rich vitamin E foods alongside of your wild yam cream or your DHEA, it is less likely that your body will turn it just straight into estrogen, right? But I choose pine pollen or even maybe Vitex a little bit, but pine pollen every day of the week for supporting testosterone levels in females and males. Um, question. Uh, what do you use for yeasty, irritated, red, inflamed area and crotch area? Daughter was using a steroid, then just put her on antifungal cream, but I wondered if you had any advice. Yeah, I mean, I really like sulfur soap, but I don't like using soap down there. It's really, really easy to throw off your microbiome, which is already happening to her. So you might consider just going old school and using whole fat real milk, plain yogurt. And I know people always freak out about it, but it's like one of those things where they're like, oh yeah, it's actually like gynecologically approved to use yogurt in your vagina for yeast infections and stuff. Because basically, all of her beneficial lactobacilli type bacteria has died off down below. And this will freak people out. But the bacteria in our vagina is pretty much the same bacteria in yogurt. It is. It really is. And so if you replace that, your body then has the ability to like fight off the fungus or fight off the yeast. It's pretty fantastic. And for the itching, you could consider making like a chamomile infused oil or just using like chamomile water sprayed down there. Chamomile is fantastic for itching. It won't do anything necessarily to kill the fungus, although it has a little bit of antibacterial, antifungal properties. But yeah, I mean, if it was like super, super, super bad, you might try some sulfur soap externally. Don't try to put it internally. Sulfur, like, murder kills fungus. It's pretty great stuff. I use sulfur soap on my armpits. I have sulfur in my pit goop. Like, it likes to kill bacteria, fungus, and things like that. When making yogurt with the specific cultures, L. reuteri and such, do you recommend raw milk or pasteurized? You have to use pasteurized. And I know I'm like super pro raw milk, but the problem is the reason why raw milk is so amazing for our health is because it has a lot of beneficial bacteria in it, and those natural flora will always be stronger than the single strain that you're putting in there. So if you don't pasteurize your raw milk, what happens is when you go to try to incubate it, the native flora that's there is usually stronger, and you might just end up with normal yogurt. But also, if your milking practices or wherever you get your raw milk from isn't as clean as it could be, well, it might not harm you just to drink it in general. If you start culturing it and making it grow, there could be something in there that's unfavorable, and you won't really know exactly what you're growing. So I pasteurize raw milk that I'm using specifically for like yogurt making. I don't pasteurize it for milk kefir, because milk kefir is like legion. It is strong enough to overtake any of the natural flora in there, but a single isolated strain like L. reuteri, it needs pasteurized milk. And you can also just, save your money and buy pasteurized milk to make that yogurt if you're not milking your own animals, right? Because raw milk is expensive and you can save that for consuming versus pasteurizing it. And I use my Instant Pot to pasteurize. I put it on the boil method for yogurt. It does a trick every time. Okay. So thanks. The treatment for intracranial hypertension I talked about last week depletes electrolytes. Oh, yeah. So if it's depleting electrolytes pretty strongly, right, you would probably want to maybe look into something like trace minerals or like one of the like real strong electrolyte blends. I mean, you can make your own too, but like if you're doing something besides just existing that's causing you to lose your electrolytes, you might need to be way more on top of it because you're actively stripping them from your body. Does that make sense? Like we all need B12 as an example, but people who take metformin are like literally taking a medication that strips it from their body, so they need way more B12, right? Same thing with the electrolytes if you're using a treatment that is stripping it. Question. Will 100 proof vodka still work to make RSO? I currently using Everclear, but I'm wanting to heed your warning about 100% alcohol. I do cook off the alcohol to make it. Yeah, at that point, just use the Everclear because you're cooking it off anyways, right? And most of that really high heat that you're going to achieve when you're cooking it off is going to flash burn off the sensitive water soluble properties. So in the case of RSO, which is Rick Sampson oil, like there's no point in using the 100 proof. But if you were gonna make like a CBD tincture where you're just using like the decarbed like buds or something, definitely use the 100 proof with the glycerin in that way. Um, Somebody said, "Thank you. It crossed my mind about using the yogurt, but wanted to ask you. I used yogurt for yeast infections a few years ago. Thanks for the advice." Yeah, I know I'm super behind because I'm scrolling through and I don't want to miss anybody's comments, so I'm probably on a delay with questions. If it seems weird that I'm like answering questions that are completely out of nowhere, that's why. um, okay, I have tried LDN in the past for CFS Fibro and I couldn't handle it even on the lowest dose. Gave it a good long try. I just wiped me out. Any ideas why this happened? Define low dose. So LDN, it always comes in low dose, but even the tiniest little capsules they give people is way too high of a dose. Like if you weren't taking a syringe and like let's say putting your 1 milligram or whatever it was capsule in some water and then like mixing that with 3 mils of water and pulling it up and then giving yourself tiny amounts of time, you are probably super duper overdoing it and not working your way up. Now you might have been doing that and it still just didn't work for you. Everybody's body is different, but the way LDN works, which is low dose naltrexone, is it's an opioid derivative. It has no opioids in it, but it's like a derivative from it, so it hits the endocrine opioid types receptors in your brain and it like makes them like turn themselves back on. It shuts them down and turns them back on in a very layman's way. I mean, it's more complex than that, but that's what it does, and it kind of like resets your whole system. So if you have a really out of whack system or your levels were already really low, it'll probably make you feel like shit for quite a while, just because it's like making your body turn something back on that it didn't want to. There are quite a few LDN forms online. I don't remember any of the exact links at the top of my head, but it would be worthwhile joining that. There's a Facebook group, but that's kind of gone a little as crazy as Facebook normally is. Right, but you can like kind of see like how people like how low they're really, because there's also ULDN, which is like ultra low dose, like as low as you can fucking possibly go, and you might have to step down to that level. For me, I like to use it intermittently. It gives me the weird dreams, obviously, and I'm already a visual spatial person. But if I take it for probably more than a month on a personal basis, I end up finding myself feeling a little depressed. And so then I take a month off, and then I go back on a month, and I take a month off if I'm dealing with like some inflammation and some pain that I really need help with that nothing else is touching, right? A few years back, it was the only thing that, besides like B12 shots, that was taking away my sciatica pain, which is totally resolved now, but like sometimes you almost just have to stop those pain pathways from sending so it doesn't just like become a groove that your system always goes down, and I don't fuck with ibuprofen, and aspirin didn't touch it, so LDN it was. Okay. Where do you buy the herbs you can't harvest? Good question. I shop around. I shop around because I know that a vast majority of the herb suppliers in America, if it's not coming directly from like an herb farm itself, they are just typically importing from like Bulgaria or Croatia, Latvia, a lot of Hungary, that whole like Eastern Europe, northern type area up there is like where a vast majority of really high quality herbs come from. The most important thing is seeing how are you treating it upon entry to the United States. Are you letting them irradiate it, or are you doing steam treatment? Because the USDA requires that any herbal or food product otherwise that comes in has to be treated for like pests, right? They don't want like diseases and pests coming in. Most people choose irradiation because it's cheaper, which is nasty. I don't want irradiated herbs. And what's shitty though is sometimes it just depends on the importer. So for example, like Mountain Rose Herbs, they produce some of their own herbs and they buy herbs from American producers, but they also buy a lot from overseas, right? And so I've seen some on their website that isn't irradiated and some that is. And so I asked for COAs, and I know that most of them are getting herbs from the same suppliers. So sometimes the more money you pay is just for the brand name, and then of course you can, like, anything on Etsy, they're just typically buying from somewhere like Herb Co. or San Francisco Herbs or Monterey Bay or any of that type of stuff, and then they're just repacking and reselling the same thing. Right? And so, really, it's just about investigating. I don't really have a specific person that I'm loyal to. When it comes to like our supplements, we have specific farms that we work with, but they only sell in like big amounts. Like they ask you how much you think you're going to use for the year so they can plan their growing schedule, right? But they also end up selling in bulk to places, that I've mentioned in the past. Um, but it's all about asking for that COA, which means Certificate of Analysis. If they aren't willing to hand you a COA, run the other way because they have no idea about the herb, right? Okay, so when making L-reuteri, will it always have the reuteri after every batch, or will I eventually have to use another capsule? I've seen people debate about that. You get about 7 batches. Get about 7 batches before the L-reuteri kind of goes wild and starts doing not the exact thing that you want it to. Some people on the L-reuteri forum say that they've never had to stop. Other people debate that you don't know if you have L-reuteri anymore. Eventually a different culture might have gotten in just from opening it up in your home and, just existing. And it might be back to like a bifidobacteria, or it might be a lactobacillus bacteria. And so usually every 7 batches, they start again, right? Um, let's see. Could I use pasteurized milk to make kefir and still get similar benefits? Raw is best, but you still get a lot of benefits from pasteurized milk kefir. Yeah, milk kefir evolved in raw milk, and so, but it works with pasteurized as well. I've seen people have like ultra pasteurized. I've seen people say that, oh, this is the best milk kefir I've ever made, and then in like 6 months they're like, for some reason my grains are getting really tiny. And so maybe stay away from the ultra pasteurized, or at least cycle through with just normal pasteurized, so like they have still sustenance to live off of. They live off of the lactose and like the galactose sugars, like the milk sugar. So there's probably something that happens during the ultra pasteurization that like makes those proteins and or the sugars not as available to them, right? You cannot use any sort of fake milk though. They know the difference. Okay. Where would you recommend to purchase insulin plant from online? Looking to make tea to help blood sugar. I bought my starts on eBay. I don't even remember the name. They have them all over there. Just people selling root starts, right? Like growing your own will always be cheaper. And especially, and again, just to put this out there as context, not as an invite for like anything political whatsoever. With tariffs, it's going to be more expensive, potentially, to start getting like a lot of these herbs that come from other countries because that's where they're from, right? Like not everything can be within the U.S. just because plants don't exist in that way. So growing your own will probably be the most expensive because or most affordable because it's already really expensive on its own. Okay, so let's talk die-off symptoms and how to make them less. I was miserable for 3 days, but then poof, over. Well, go a little slower. If you start having die-off from eating fermented food or milk kefir or yogurt or anything like that, it's your body is just like rapidly, like you are murder killing bad bacteria, and then they release endotoxins in your body, and then you just kind of feel like you have the flu. You feel like shit. You might have a headache. You might have skin flushing. You might puke your brains out. You might shit your brains out. But the answer is always to like slow down on the amount you're consuming, and then you could work with something like good old activated charcoal. Probably a few hours after, let's say you drink milk kefir, to help absorb some of those endotoxins. Make sure you're eating lots of fiber, like good fiber, like beans and soaked oats and things like that, to help bind to those toxins that are now in your bile and just kind of get it out of your body. Because if you're not shitting well, you're not detoxing well, and it just sits in there. Um, Thank you so much for the super, Tammy. I appreciate it. Question: 17-year-old MTHFR mutation diagnosed ADHD, but suffering with lots of anxiety, causing hair pulling, which is now causing some depression. It's been a year since this has started. Herbs you can recommend. So, I was diagnosed with the MTHFR mutation. Right, but like that's okay because like 70% of the world has MTHFR mutation, but they've noticed like a huge uptick in it, and it really only started to be like something that people talked about roughly around the 90s, and then it picked up steam in like the mid 2000s, and it became like everything everybody talked about and blamed everything on. But they haven't really updated their research, not really. Until recently, people started talking about actually this is a riboflavin deficiency. Right. And so, and I'm getting to something. So I was like, oh, well, methylfolate always made me feel like shit and have anxiety. And there's a lot of people that think it's not good for you to take the premethylated stuff, even though they tell you that's what you're supposed to do with the MTHFR. And so I was like, huh, it's riboflavin, huh? A lot of people are low in riboflavin because we don't eat riboflavin foods anymore. Not really. We don't eat eggs the way we do now. They're too expensive for it. But what's really interesting is when I started really increasing my riboflavin intake, and then last year I did a full genetic sequencing because I'm just from a weird fucking culture and I needed to see what's happening in my body. I suddenly didn't have the MTHFR mutation anymore. And I'm like, what? Right? And so it was really interesting. And it wasn't a miscal before somebody who's like a geneticist pops in. Like, it wasn't a miscal. It just showed it as no longer like just the mutation just wasn't there. And I found that really interesting. And so I would consider, like, with deep anxiety, looking deeper at your kiddo's B vitamin status. I would get riboflavin tested, niacin levels tested. I would get B1 tested, thiamine. I would get B6, B5. I would hop online because your doctor's probably too ignorant, I'm just going to say it, to do it or to agree with it or even understand. I would hop online and find the most comprehensive B vitamin panel that you can get done. Right. I would do that. I would really start looking at other B vitamin issues, right? Because we can feel like pulling our fucking hair out when we don't have a certain amount of B vitamins, and some of them are definitely linked to like mental health issues, right? And it's so much beyond methylation, and I hate how simplified people make methylation sound. It's not like, oh, I can't methylate, so I just take this vitamin and I'm good. But really, you have to look at the whole picture of all the B vitamins and what's actually happening, right? Like, what is actually happening. But it is definitely something to look into because we can just also just feel depressed and everything else like that when our B vitamins aren't correct. If you have a good functional medicine doctor, they like to throw tests. They're really big into testing. So if you have a functional medicine doctor access to one, you can be like, I want you to test like every B vitamin there is. They might be like, all right. But a normal doctor is not. You're lucky if they'll do a B12 test, right? Okay. So, thank you so much for the Super Melodies Garden, Jewel. Would you consider freeze-drying herbs the same as curing them? No. So, I don't like freeze dryers. I'm just going to straight up say it. You can use a freeze dryer for herbs if you're cooking with them and you only care about the flavor, but for those of you who own a freeze dryer, you know that it gets really hot, right? So what's crazy is when people don't own a freeze dryer, and I had one for a little while and I sold it because I was like, this thing is ridiculous. What happens is it freezes, but then it gets really hot, and then it freezes, and then it gets really hot, and then it freezes. It doesn't do the hot as much as it does the cold, but it does get really hot, and they're trying to make the water evaporate rapidly out of it. It's that rapid swing, right? And so it may, in theory, make your vitamin content last longer, although I would argue that that really high hot cycle kills a lot of vitamin content, but it's gonna destroy a lot of the water soluble VOCs because they're really delicate. And so it's not quite the same. Also, from a different perspective, just for quality, people started trying to do it with weed, right? Because curing has been around for a long, long time, but curing herbs, it was a big thing with like weed quality. Like you could grow like beautiful weed, but if you dried it instead of cured it, like if you didn't know what you were doing at the end, it turns nasty, right? So they were like, "Oh, cool. Well, we've been curing for years. Now let's try this freeze-dried weed." And I feel bad because, and I don't even smoke weed, but like I feel bad because they're like, "Oh, well, it turns out killed a bunch of the THC, right? Like it might have had all the other properties and it looked great, but it was like, nope, it didn't work." So I'm pretty skeptical. I wouldn't use it for that. I used it for a little while for like drying like mushrooms and like food and stuff, but I was like, this thing takes up a huge amount of space, huge amount of electricity. It just, you don't make as much as you feel like you do. And I know that they're like, it shrinks down, but it's like, I don't know. I really think they're overhyped personally. If people like them, that's fine. If you've got a candy business and you're raking in money, awesome. But I think there are a lot of other preservation methods that people could get under their belt beyond curing herbs, obviously, and things like that, before they invest thousands of dollars into a freeze dryer that then sucks down even more electricity than an average like dehydrator, right? Okay, so let's see. If somebody said, apologize if my question is one you don't feel comfortable answering, I might have just missed it. I don't think I did. Uh, yes, folate supplements don't make us feel good. Yeah, that's back to the MTHFR thing, right? They make you feel like shit, right? And so I eat a lot of eggs, which makes me sound like a rich person right now, which is so weird because eggs are always like, I'm fucking poor, I eat eggs, right? Like it's what I could afford, but we have our own chickens so that, balances it a little bit. My chickens are wild and rough, man. I don't coddle my chickens like a lot of people do. We do feed them, but we don't feed them like other people do because I want them out on the land. I want them digging for bugs, finding protein, getting rid of my ticks and like that. I mean, if there's snow on the ground, we feed them more aggressively, but right now they're out there ripping under things, finding bugs, and I also get breeds that are like known for that. Like I want a rough, ready chicken. Like I don't want one that I have to pamper that can't like fend for itself, right? And so we go through a lot less feed. Uh, okay. Okay. So where do you stand on the copper cup craze or even copper bans? Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Copper is something that we need in our diet, but too much copper will fuck you up. It's not one of those things like I've been copper deficient before, but I will never drink out of a copper cup. Now, I might wear a copper bracelet, but I wouldn't wear it to the point where I'm turning like green from it, right? Like it's really easy to mess up your copper. Like if you're eating plenty of like red meat and high quality chocolate and you're also eating like shellfish and you're eating like organ meats, like I would do that every day all day before I drink out of a copper cup, right? Like, and I know that people did it for a long time in the past, but it's like not the way we do it now. And then there's a question about like the purity of the copper that they're using. Like I've seen people talk about like it's not actually copper, it's just like colored other color metal that looks copper, right? Because people like fake shit all the time now. Like, I don't know, you can get sick if you have copper pipes in your home still, like a lot that you're drinking out of. Like, it's just, I don't know, it's really, really easy to overdo it on the copper and then you'll repress your your iron levels. And so it's not something that I would personally do, although I think copper jewelry is beautiful. Um, let's see. Would you be happy to cover perimenopause and the hormonal cravings, roller coaster, mental and weight gain, seriously suffering? Yeah, I've talked about that quite a lot. Um, I don't know, lately, because, I turned 40 in July, and that's so weird to me. I'm like, where did the last 5 years ago? I feel like something was stolen from me, right? But, I don't know, I've been kind of like having a lot of internal dialogue with myself about like the concept of like menopause and like how like we're hell-bent on like preventing it from ever happening, right? But I think there's like a transition period, and I think women used to work with like herbs and things unknowingly that were helping them, and maybe they did know. I mean, our ancestors are a lot smarter than we give them credit for. They survived a lot better than we did with no creature comforts a lot. We'd fucking die if we were in their shoes. Most of us would. But you can start working with something like wild yam or pine pollen, depending on what's going on with your body. But I think a lot of the times the reason that Women are suffering so much more with perimenopause or even menopause is because we're so estrogen dominant before it starts. Right? We're so high in estrogen that when it slowly starts to lower, we feel like we're gonna fucking die. And so, really, just like supporting those estrogen detox pathways with things like chamomile, making sure that you're eating like like wholesome food, healthy animal fats, like more traditional, like whole food eating can go a long way. And the weight gain, we're not supposed to be a size zero by the time we're perimenopause. And I know that like if it's like really bad weight gain, it can be, bad for our body. Like if it's like aggressive and we've gained like 100 pounds. But like I've had a lot of women being like, I've gained 10 pounds in the past year, help. I'm like, did you need 10 pounds? Like that's not enough. Like if you aren't gaining huge amounts of weight, and even if you are, I don't like to say look at your diet in a condescending way because I hate when people are like, oh, you don't have self control or anything like that. But like, it's more like look at the foods that you are eating. Like, are they like, do they have an ingredients list? Because if they have an ingredients list, it's ultra processed in some way, and it's more likely that your body doesn't know what to do with that, right? And hormone changes can change how we utilize energy. You might have shifted from using fat for energy and like also glucose into your body now wants glucose, so it just stores the fat. So it'll sound crazy, but sometimes we do better on like a high carb, low fat diet, like if our body is not utilizing the fat for energy like it used to. But also that doesn't mean like we're eating candy bars and like pastries and like all that type of shit. I'm talking like squash and nuts and brown rice and beans and carbohydrates that our body are used to and are stable. Oregano tincture. I was reading that you should take it 3 weeks on, 1 week off, but then no explanation as to why. So you're probably not buying an oregano tincture unless you actually found a tincture. Most of the time it's oregano oil, and that's an essential oil, and they're trying to help you not kill yourself with it. But there's a whole section in my book, um, Essentially Deadly, the unspoken dangers of essential oils, and I go over like every section of the body in this, like every area, right? And one of it is gut health, and right off the bat there's like huge amounts of information how like oregano oil, like essential oil, like ruins people's lives, but they're not allowed to talk about it. They're shamed, they're yelled at, they're told they did it wrong or that they need a different brand. But no, so that's why they're telling you 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, because you're ruthlessly killing your gut bacteria. But if it was a real tincture, like actually made with a real plant, not like hundreds of pounds refined into a single drop, you wouldn't have the same issues, and you wouldn't have to alternate that way, right? You could also just make oregano tea. You could start cooking with oregano. There's a lot of ways to work with oregano without having to like, use the industrial $1 billion complex and micro refine it into a ultra processed bottle, right? Um, Somebody said I literally had a chicken walk into my yard today. This is the second one in 6 months. My milkshake brings all the chickens to the yard. Somebody's chickens are getting out of their little enclosure somewhere, right? You're like, hey, I'm gonna start keeping these chickens. They're selling online right now for like $40 a pop for some raggedy ass 2-year-old chickens that are slow to lay eggs, right? Like, and I'm like, God, I've seen them on Craigslist like crazy right now because people are desperate, right? So they like so they're like, oh, I can sell this chicken for some money, and people are like, I need chickens, right? But you wait, this fall you're gonna be able to buy chickens at a fire sale for all the people that got baby chicks and then don't want to like commit to them or realize that it takes 6 months or all that type of stuff, or realize that like chicken shit brings flies to everywhere, or they want to go on vacation and or just things like that. They'll start selling them for cheap. Um, my daughter has very thin hair, not growing around the side hairline, has autism, picky eater. Any suggestions? Father and I are thinking of adding your nutrition yeast drink into her diet. Yeah, if she has really thin hair and she's a picky eater, she's probably really, really low in nutrients, and her thyroid might be tanked. Right, it'd be worth getting a thyroid panel done, but also like just a general like, well, maybe a little wider than general like nutrient panel done, because she could be losing hair from lack of nutrients as well as low thyroid, right? And then if you could get her to drink it, nourishing herbal infusion of nettle would probably be good. The brewer's yeast wouldn't be bad. That would put vitamin B's into her diet, all except for B12 that she probably needs. And then it may or may not apply, but maybe find, if you haven't already, I'm sure you've walked down a very hard road as is. And I deeply understand like how hard it is around like getting kids to eat. Um, have you looked into ARFID, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder? And if so, have you tried like an ARFID like nutritionalist slash therapist to like help them expand their picky eating? A lot of them are like much different than an average nutritionalist, and like the ways that they can maybe help her feel safe or comfortable slowly expanding her diet would probably be the best thing to do long run. Right, because we need like nutrients and stuff like that, and we can supplement to get some of them, but like ultimately, like expanding the diet is going to like make a huge improvement on their health, right? Okay. Oh, fresh plant and alcohol, not EO for the oregano oil or for the oregano tincture. They're probably going. The reason they're probably telling you that is they're going off of what they hear everywhere for the oregano oil, right? I went off about that, but I mean, it's people need to hear it. But like, so if you look up oregano right now, you're just gonna see everything for oregano oil, which is an essential oil, and so they'll probably be going off of the same thing. But check the label or whoever made it if you didn't make it yourself. Sorry if I missed it. You said you made it yourself. I've seen people sell oregano tincture that is just essential oils added to glycerin. And so wherever you bought it from, if you didn't make it, or if a friend made it, make sure that it is with fresh plants, because I've seen sneaky shit out there. You know what's so frustrating for me is that, like, for me to sell my herbal supplements or tinctures, like the level of like labeling clarity I have to do is wild. Like I don't just have to like say that it's this plant. I have to say what part of the plant, what the scientific name, all this. But with essential oils, because they're regulated as a cosmetic, not a supplement, there's literally no regulations that make them listed in a specific way. And they can call it an extract, they can call it a flavoring, they can call it a scent, they can call it an oil, they can call it all kinds of things, because there's no one set regulation. Because anybody who is ingesting essential oils or even telling you to as an MLM rep is using it off label. Because the companies never actually tell you to do it. Their reps do and other people do, because they have it classified as a cosmetic. Gets away with a lot of regulations they don't have to follow because they're not a supplement. Okay, so I'm going to answer this last one, and I'm going to jump off because it's been an hour, and I know that my daughter is being an admin right now, and they are on the road. So I feel bad. Last question is, my hands are all gnarly from arthritis. Any advice on how to help them? Thanks. It depends on the type of arthritis. So if it's like osteo from like just wear and tear, you might find good relief from like castor oil rubbed in daily. Even better if you infuse some comfrey into that castor oil. You could buy a cheap jug of castor oil, take half of it, start infusing that with some dried comfrey leaf, put it somewhere warm for like 6 weeks, right? And then you could use the plain comfrey in the meantime, or the plain castor oil in the meantime on your hands to start kind of relieving some of that. And then I would look into how people are using high dose vitamin C alongside of gelatin to increase collagen synthesis and like repair osteo issues, right? To get some of that loosened up. And then I came across it a while ago and it was really interesting. So like most chiropractors are only focusing on the spine, but there are certain chiropractors that took like extra schooling that can also do extremities. If you found a chiropractor that was like certified in extremity work, they might be able to work on opening up those stuck joints and areas in your hand, but a normal chiropractor won't do it. You have to find one that does extremities, and you might have to travel away for that, but it might be worth looking into. So thank you so much for watching, members. I really appreciate your support and being here with me, and I hope this was a little easier to get your question answered. Hopefully I didn't miss anybody's questions. I tried to get them all. And I will be back next Sunday. If you're rewatching this, hi future person, and you're not a member and you want to become a member, that link will be in the description box below, and also in a pinned comment usually. It's just a way to give me a couple bucks a month. It keeps the roof over my head head, tea in my pot. Everybody who's a member, they do get early access to videos as I'm able to upload them, and these members videos will also like be available to members first, right? And then like if you don't have the money to join, it's okay, because I always release these. I will start releasing these. This is only my second one. I will release these as long as like as well as my other videos like in time. So it's not a paywall, it's just a little bitty baby time wall. And then also, as always, you can check things out in my shop. You can use the one-time code TEATIME, TEATIME, to save 10% off of anything you like. I've got books, capsules, I've got something for everybody, and it directly supports my capacity to exist here with you. And make sure that you like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications, and share. Sharing is super important because it helps, get all that information out there. And for my daughter and my husband that are listening, I love you very much. Drive safe. See you later, folks. Bye.